Beggar woman asked for shelter, not knowing the house owner was her long-lost son. The rain pounded against the elegant gated community of Scarsdale, on the outskirts of New York City, as Mrs. Evelyn Barnes, 68 years old, shivering from the cold, gathered the courage to knock on that imposing solid wood door. Her wrinkled hands, marked by time and hardship, hesitated for a moment before pressing the mansion's doorbell. Michael Coleman, 45, a respected real estate businessman, was about to retire for the night after a long day of meetings when the sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. Annoyed by the interruption, he considered ignoring it, but something compelled him to answer. When he opened the door, he found a gray-haired woman completely drenched, wearing a simple faded dress, her feet nearly bare in worn-out slippers. "Please, sir, I'm sorry to bother you," Mrs. Evelyn said in a shaky voice. "I'm looking for a place to spend the night. The storm took everything I had, and the city shelter is full. Can I sleep on your porch just until the rain passes?" Michael studied the woman with a mix of pity and discomfort. He was ready to politely refuse when he noticed something strange on her right hand, a crescent-shaped scar stretching from the base of her thumb to her wrist. That mark made his heart race inexplicably. "Emily, who's at the door at this hour?" asked Margaret, the housekeeper, approaching with firm steps. "It's a lady," Michael replied, still fixated on the scar. "She needs shelter because of the storm." "So the security protocol," Margaret began with her usual sternness. "I think we can make an exception," Michael interrupted, surprising even himself with the decision. "She can come in. We have a guest room that's not being used." Evelyn couldn't believe what she was hearing. People like her who wandered from town to town rarely found kindness in mansions like this. "Are you sure, sir?" she asked, suspicious. "I don't want to cause trouble. I can stay in the service area or even the garage." "I'm sure," Michael said with a conviction he didn't fully understand. "Besides, I've been needing someone to organize my library. It would be temporary work, room and board. Do you have experience with books?" Evelyn hesitated. For 30 years she had worked as a municipal library assistant before her life fell apart. This was too good to be true. "Yes, sir. I worked with books for many years," she answered softly. "Great," Michael said with a restrained smile. "Margaret, please take Evelyn Barnes. Take Mrs. Evelyn to the guest room on the second floor and arrange for dry clothes and a warm bath." Margaret, visibly displeased, nodded stiffly. "As you wish. Follow me, ma'am." As she followed the housekeeper up the grand staircase, Evelyn couldn't hold back her tears. She hadn't slept in a real bed in months. Her few belongings were in a plastic bag tucked inside. Her worn coat, some documents, a yellowed photograph, and a small carved wooden box she never let go of. Michael returned to his study unsettled, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. That scar, why did it affect him so much? He opened the locked drawer of his desk and pulled out an old folder. Inside was his adoption certificate and a faded photo of a young woman holding a baby. The official document mentioned a physical trait of his birth mother, crescent-shaped scar on the right hand. The next morning, Evelyn woke up disoriented in the spacious, comfortable room. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. A hot bath, clean clothes, and a soft bed, luxuries she hadn't known in so long. On a chair, she found a simple yet dignified dress, clearly bought in haste. Upon descending, she found Michael having coffee on the balcony overlooking the garden. "Good morning, Mrs. Evelyn. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years, sir," she replied sincerely. "I truly appreciate your kindness, but I don't want to overstay my welcome. I can start working in the library right away." "First have breakfast," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Then Margaret will show you the library." As they had breakfast, Michael observed her discreetly. There was something familiar about this woman, something beyond the scar. The way she held her cup, the slight tilt of her head when listening, certain mannerisms that stirred a distant, nearly forgotten memory. "You're not from around here, judging by your accent," Michael remarked. "I'm from Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, but I left many years ago," Evelyn replied, avoiding details. "And how did you end up—" He hesitated, searching for delicate words. On the streets, she finished with dignity, life has its paths, Dr. Michael. Sometimes a string of misfortunes drags you down and you can't get back up. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, Evelyn devoted herself to organizing the library with a skill that surprised Michael. She knew cataloging systems, handled books with expert care, and seemed happy among the volumes. Margaret, however, made no effort to hide her suspicion. She watched every move of the guest, as she called Evelyn with clear disdain, waiting to catch her in some suspicious act. During meals, she hovered nearby, as if afraid Evelyn would steal the silverware. One afternoon, while organizing the American literature section, Evelyn found something that froze her in place, an old copy of The Little Prince, with a handwritten inscription on the first page. To my little Michael, may the stars always light your path. With love, your mother. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was her own from 30 years ago. This was the book she had given her son on the last birthday they spent together, before Harold, her ex-husband, had thrown her out and barred her from seeing the boy. Her legs weakened. She sank to the floor between the shelves, clutching the book to her chest. How was this possible? Could her Michael be the same boy she had lost? No, it had to be a coincidence. Michael was a common name, and this copy could have been bought at some second-hand store. Still, she couldn't resist. She slipped the book into her pocket. She needed to examine it carefully, to confirm if it was truly the one she had given her son. It was then that she noticed the small red light of the security camera in the corner of the library. At dinner, Michael seemed more thoughtful than usual. He watched Evelyn intently, as if searching for answers to questions he hadn't yet asked. Mrs. Evelyn, I'd like to know more about your life, if you don't mind, he finally said. There isn't much to tell, Dr. Michael. Did you have a family? Children? The question struck her like a blow. Her hands trembled slightly. I had a son, but I lost him many years ago. Lost him how? It's a sad story, Doctor. I was married to a difficult man. When I decided to leave him, he used his power and influence to keep me from my boy. He forbade me from seeing him, and when I tried to fight in court, he used his well-connected friends to have me declared mentally unstable. I was institutionalized against my will. By the time I got out, my son had disappeared with him. Michael swallowed hard. The story resonated strangely with the little he knew of his own past. How old would your son be today? 45, Evelyn answered, unaware that it was exactly Michael's age. A heavy silence filled the dining room. Michael stared at his plate, processing the information. I noticed you took a book today, he said abruptly, changing the subject. The cameras caught it. Evelyn paled. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean to steal, it's just... Her hands trembled. That book reminded me of one I gave my son. The dedication is very similar. May I see it? Reluctantly, Evelyn pulled the Little Prince from her pocket and handed it to Michael. He opened it to the first page and read the dedication aloud. This book was a gift from my birth mother, according to my adoptive parents, Michael explained. It's one of the few things I have of hers. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. My son's name was Michael, she whispered, and I wrote those exact words in this same handwriting, in the last gift I gave him. That night neither of them could sleep. Evelyn tossed and turned, caught between hope and fear. Could it be that after 30 years of searching, fate had led her straight to her son's doorstep? Michael, in his room, pored over old adoption papers, the original birth certificate listing Evelyn Barnes as his birth mother, and the only photo he had of her, a woman in her early 20s smiling shyly with a baby in her arms. The next morning, Margaret burst into Michael's office, clearly agitated. Sir, you need to see this. I found it in that woman's room. In her hands was the small wooden box that belonged to Evelyn. She had forced the lock. You went through her things, Michael asked, angered by the invasion of privacy. It's my duty to protect you, sir. And look what she keeps. Inside the box were newspaper clippings about the disappearance of a 4-year-old boy named Michael Barnes. taken by his father after a messy court case. There were also childhood drawings, a lock of brown hair tied with a blue ribbon, and an original birth certificate. The mother's name, Evelyn Barnes, the son's name, Michael Barnes Coleman. Michael felt the ground vanish beneath him. Coleman was his adoptive parents' last name, though they had kept his first name. The birth date was his. "Margaret, please, I'd like to be alone," he said, his voice choked. When the housekeeper left, Michael examined every item in the box, every clipping, every document. There were also unsent letters addressed to her son, dated over the past 30 years. The last had been written just 3 months earlier. "My dearest Michael, I'm still searching for you. I've traveled to so many cities, visited so many places. Sometimes I think I won't last until I find you, but hope keeps me alive. You'd be 45 now. A grown man. You'd have your own life, maybe children. You probably don't even remember me. They may have even told you I abandoned you. But no. To this, my son, not a single day has passed without me thinking of you, without me trying to find you." Tears streamed freely down Michael's face. 30 years of searching, 30 years of unsent letters, 30 years of a mother who never gave up. At lunch, Michael kept his distance, watching Evelyn with new eyes. Now he saw the resemblance. The same hazel green eyes, the same shape of the face, the same unconscious habit of touching her chin when deep in thought. "Mrs. Evelyn, tell me about your son," he asked suddenly. "What was he like as a child?" Evelyn smiled, her eyes shining. "With distant memories. Michael was a sweet, curious boy. He loved stories, especially about stars and planets. That's why I gave him the Little Prince for the last birthday we spent together. He had a wooden horse he wouldn't let go of, a toy his grandfather had made for him. And there was a birthmark, a small dark spot on the nape of his neck, hidden by his hair." Michael swallowed hard. The birthmark on the nape of the neck. No one except him and his adoptive parents knew about it. "He also loved to sing a lullaby I made just for him," continued Evelyn, lost in reminiscence. "It was about a traveler from the stars who always came back home." Michael couldn't hold back any longer. He stood up abruptly. "Starlight, traveler, night of the night, always returned to morning's embrace," he recited with a trembling voice. "That's how it began." Evelyn froze, her wide eyes locked onto Michael. How could you know that?" Michael brushed his hair aside, revealing the small, irregular, star-shaped mark on his neck. "Because I'm your son, Mom. I'm your Michael." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Time seemed to stop in that dining room. Evelyn rose unsteadily, her legs trembling, moving toward Michael as if approaching a mirage that might vanish at any moment. With hesitant hands, she touched the face of the man before her, tracing his features like reading a precious map. Her fingers trembled as she felt the texture of his skin, outlined the shape of his jaw, noticed the familiar curve of the eyes now staring back at her with restrained tears. "My son," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My boy." Michael held his mother's hands, those hands wrinkled by time and suffering, and kissed them reverently. 3 decades of absence, of inexplicable emptiness, of unanswered questions crumbled before this reunion. "For so long I wondered," he began, his voice choked. "They told me you had abandoned me, that you didn't want me." "Never," Evelyn exclaimed with a force that seemed disproportionate to her frail body. "There wasn't a single day I didn't try to find you. Your father, he used all his power to keep me away from you, made me seem unstable, had me committed, against my will. When I finally got out, you were gone." Margaret watched from the doorway, her usually stern face now marked by unrestrained astonishment. The housekeeper who had served the Coleman family for 20 years had never seen her employer shed a tear, and now he sobbed like a child in the arms of this woman whom, until days ago, she had considered an intruder. The hours that followed passed like a dream for mother and son. Sitting in the library, they exchanged fragments of their lives, trying to piece together the puzzle of 30 years apart. Michael spoke of his adoption by the Colemans, a wealthy and loving couple who had always avoided speaking of his origins. "They were good parents," Michael admitted, "but I always felt there was a void, a part of me missing." Evelyn, in turn, recounted her odyssey to find her son. After being released from the psychiatric clinic where she'd been confined, against her will, she discovered Harold had moved away with the boy. With no resources or support, she began an unrelenting search, town after town. I worked as a librarian in different cities, always looking, always asking, always hoping for a clue, she explained. But your father was influential. He changed names, used his connections to make my search impossible. And how did you end up in this situation? Michael asked, referring to his mother's homelessness. Evelyn sighed deeply before continuing. 5 years ago, I had a serious heart condition. No health insurance and limited savings. The treatment took everything I had. I lost my small apartment, then my job at the Hartford Public Library. One thing led to another, and well, the streets were all that remained. But even so, I never stopped looking for you. Michael felt a mix of emotions, joy at their reunion, guilt for having lived comfortably while his mother faced hardships, and a growing anger toward the man who had separated them. And my father, what happened to him? Harold had a stroke a few years ago. He's in a nursing home in Greenwich, from what I've heard. He lost everything in his final years, Evelyn replied without noticeable bitterness in her voice. He paid for his choices in a way I would never have wished. That evening, Michael insisted Evelyn take the master bedroom, but she firmly refused. I already have more than I ever dreamed, my son. I found you. The guest room is a palace to me. Before retiring, Michael brought something he had kept in his office, a small wooden horse worn by time but still recognizable. Do you remember this? He asked, placing the toy in Evelyn's hands. Her eyes lit up. The little horse your grandfather made. You kept it all these years. It was the only thing I had from my past. My adoptive parents said I refused to let go of it when I arrived. That night, for the first time in 30 years, Evelyn slept with a light heart. Her son was alive, a good man, and against all odds, fate had brought them back together. The next morning, Michael woke early and did something he had never done before. He prepared breakfast himself. When Evelyn came downstairs, she found the table set with fruit, bread, and fresh coffee. Good morning, Mother, he said, the word feeling strange and wonderful in his mouth. Good morning, my son, she replied, her eyes brimming with tears. She had never imagined she would say those words to her Michael again. I have something to propose, he said as they served themselves. I want you to come live with me, permanently. This house is too big for just one person. Evelyn hesitated. Michael, you have your life, your routine. I don't want to be a burden or cause any inconvenience. A burden? Michael laughed in disbelief. Mother, I spent 30 years feeling like something was missing in my life. Now I know what it was, and I won't let us be separated again. As they discussed the details of their new life together, Margaret entered the dining room with an uncharacteristically gentle expression. Mrs. Evelyn, I've prepared the master bedroom as per Mr. Michael's instructions, the housekeeper said, now with genuine respect in her voice, and I took the liberty of organizing a wardrobe with some basic items you'll need. Michael looked at the housekeeper in surprise. Margaret had never shown such thoughtfulness before. Thank you, Margaret, Evelyn replied kindly. But I already told Michael the guest room is more than enough for me. If I may offer my opinion, ma'am, Margaret insisted, the master's mother deserves the best this house has to offer. The following weeks were a period of adjustment for everyone. Michael rearranged his professional schedule to spend more time at home. Evelyn, accustomed to independence despite her struggles, insisted on making herself useful, continuing her work at the library and adding her personal touch to the house's decor. Surprisingly, Margaret became an ally. The housekeeper, who had initially been wary of Evelyn, now treated her with deference, often seeking her guidance on Michael's preferences. He never says it, but he hates cauliflower, Margaret confided one morning in the kitchen. And he always saves the blue tie for important occasions. When he was little, he wouldn't eat cauliflower either, Evelyn laughed. Some things never change. Michael, however, grew concerned about Evelyn's health. Observing her more closely, he noticed her occasional shortness of breath and how easily she tired after small efforts. Despite her initial resistance, he insisted on a full medical checkup. The diagnosis confirmed their suspicions. The heart condition Evelyn had mentioned had worsened over the years without proper treatment. She would need continuous medication and possibly surgery. "Don't worry about that," said Evelyn, downplaying the situation. "I've already lived longer than I expected. Finding you was miracle enough for me." "Don't even think like that," Michael replied firmly. "We've just found each other again, and we have many years ahead. We'll treat this with the best specialists." As Evelyn began her cardiac treatment, Michael started his own personal investigation. He wanted to better understand what had happened in the past, how his biological father had managed to separate them so effectively. Using his contacts and resources, he located old legal records, uncovering a disturbing pattern of corruption and manipulation. Harold Coleman, his biological father, had bribed doctors to certify that Evelyn suffered from mental illness, paid off witnesses, and used his influence to expedite an adoption that, under normal circumstances, would never have been approved. On a rainy afternoon, much like the one when Evelyn had knocked on his door, Michael made a decision. He drove to Greenwich, where his biological father lived in a care facility for patients with neurological conditions. The receptionist hesitated when he asked to see Harold Coleman. "Are you a relative?" she asked, checking a list. "I'm Michael Coleman, his son," he replied with a calm he didn't feel. The woman led him to a sunroom, where an elderly man in a wheelchair watched the rainfall. Michael vaguely recognized the features he sometimes saw in his own face, the shape of the jaw, the thick eyebrows. "Father," he called, stepping closer. The man turned slowly. His eyes, still sharp despite his age, studied Michael with a mix of confusion and recognition. "Michael." His voice was weak, slurred from the stroke. "Is it really you?" "Yes, it's me." Harold tried to smile, but only one side of his face responded. "Son, I'm glad you came. I thought I'd never see you again." Michael sat across from his father, studying the man who was both familiar and a complete stranger. "I found my mother," he said finally, without preamble. The smile faded from Harold's face. A conflict of emotions flashed in his eyes: surprise, guilt, fear. "How?" he began, but Michael interrupted. "She knocked on my door during a storm, looking for shelter. She spent 30 years searching for me, while you did everything to keep us apart." Harold closed his eyes, as if the sudden light were too bright. "How you don't understand," he murmured. "I loved you too much, I couldn't lose you. So you decided it was better for me to lose my mother." Michael's voice trembled slightly. "I've seen the documents, Father. I saw how you manipulated everything, how you bought people off, how you destroyed her life." A single tear rolled down the elderly man's partially paralyzed face. "I was wrong," he admitted with difficulty. "I spent years trying to find them, to fix my mistake." "Find who? My mother or me?" "Both. When I lost everything, I realized what I'd done, but it was too late." Michael felt the anger he'd carried on the drive there begin to fade, replaced by something like pity. The man before him was just a shadow of the powerful, manipulative figure who had torn a mother and son apart. "My mother is sick, Father. Her heart is weak after years of living in hardship, searching for me." Harold swallowed hard, more tears falling silently. "Forgive me," he whispered. "There's no way to fix it, but forgive me." Michael didn't answer right away. He hadn't come seeking reconciliation, only answers. But faced with that broken man who acknowledged his mistakes, even if belatedly, she felt the cycle of resentment needed to be broken. "I don't know if I can forgive yet," she said honestly, "but I can try to understand. And maybe, with time." Upon returning home, Michael found Evelyn in the library, organizing the Brazilian poetry section. He watched her for a moment before announcing his presence, her grey hair tied in a simple bun, her fragile body but dignified posture, her attentive eyes scanning the book spines. "Mom?" he called softly. Evelyn turned with a smile that faded when she noticed her son's serious expression. "What's wrong, my son? You look worried." "I went to see my father today." The book Evelyn was holding nearly slipped from her hands. "Harold, you went to see him?" Michael nodded, stepping closer. "I needed to understand, Mom. I needed to look him in the eye and ask why." Evelyn slowly sat in a nearby armchair, her fingers tightly interlaced in her lap. "And what did he say?" "That he's sorry. That he spent years trying to find us to make amends." Michael hesitated before adding, "He's very weak, Mom. The stroke severely affected his mobility and speech." A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, Evelyn looked up at her son. "Do you think I should see him?" The question surprised Michael. He hadn't expected his mother to consider meeting the man who had destroyed her life. "Glios would want to see him." Evelyn thought for a few moments. "For 30 years I imagined what I'd say to Harold if I ever saw him again. I thought of all the accusations, all the resentment I'd want to pour out. But now," she sighed deeply, "now I just feel tired. That hatred has taken up too much space in my life, Michael." "So you do want to see him?" Michael pressed, still uncertain. "Yes, to close this chapter once and for all." The following week, mother and son drove to the clinic in Greenwich. Michael watched Evelyn with concern. She seemed tense but determined. The entire way they talked about trivial things, avoiding the main reason for their trip. In the clinic sunroom, Harold waited, having been told about the visit. When he saw Evelyn enter with their son, his face twisted into an expression mixing shock and remorse. "Evelyn," he murmured, his voice choked, "it's really you." She stepped closer slowly, her eyes fixed on the man she had once loved. Then, feared and finally tried to forget. "Hello, Harold," she said simply. Michael watched the encounter with a tight heart. It felt surreal to see his biological parents together after so long, under such different circumstances than those that had torn them apart. "You're beautiful," Harold said, his eyes wet. "You always were." "And you've changed," Evelyn replied without hostility, just stating the obvious. "Time hasn't been kind to me," he admitted, deservedly. Evelyn sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap with a dignity that impressed Michael. There was no accusation in her posture, just a quiet acceptance. "Why, Harold?" she finally asked. "Why did you do that to us?" The man lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. Pride, possessiveness, fear of losing. He paused, searching for the right words. "When you decided to leave, I thought you were taking my son from me. I couldn't accept it. Power corrupted me completely. I never wanted to keep Michael from you," Evelyn said firmly. "I just couldn't live that way anymore." "I know," Harold admitted. "But back then, I couldn't see past my own selfishness." A nurse approached, offering water, creating a brief pause in the tense conversation. When she left, Harold looked at his son, then back at Evelyn. "When I lost everything, my money, my influence, my health, I finally understood, but it was too late. I tried to find them, hired investigators, nothing." "Fate has its own paths," Evelyn remarked, a slight tremor in her voice. "Of all the doors I could have knocked on that stormy night, I knocked on my son's." Harold nodded slowly, tears now streaming freely down his partially paralyzed face. "Evelyn, I know I can't fix what I did, but I need you to know I'm sorry, deeply." Michael watched his mother, admiring her strength. After 30 years of suffering caused by that man, she was there, listening to his apologies with a serenity few could muster. "Harold, I realized long ago that hatred only poisoned me," Evelyn finally said. "I didn't come to reopen wounds or demand emotional debts. I came to close this chapter, and maybe so our son wouldn't have to choose between us." The words struck Michael like lightning. His mother had understood something he hadn't even noticed, his worry about maintaining a relationship with both parents, given their history. "You're his parents," Evelyn continued softly, "and he deserves to have you both in his life if that's what he wants. I won't stand in the way of that." Harold sobbed, unable to contain his emotion. "You were always better than I deserved," he managed between tears. "Our son was lucky to be found by you." As they left the clinic, Michael noticed his mother seemed lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. In the car, she remained silent for a while, gazing at the scenery. "Thank you for bringing me, son," she finally said. "It was something I needed to do." "You were amazing in there, Mom," Michael replied, admiration clear in his voice. "I don't know if I could be that generous in your place." Evelyn smiled gently. "Resentment is a luxury I can no longer afford, Michael. I've wasted too much time on it. Now, I just want to enjoy the time we have together." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the weeks that followed, life at the Coleman mansion found a new rhythm. Evelyn's presence brought warmth to a space that, despite its luxury, had always felt cold and impersonal. Small touches were visible everywhere. Vases of fresh flowers, open books on side tables, the occasional scent of homemade bread wafting from the kitchen. Michael, a businessman always focused on results and efficiency, now found himself slowing down, making more time to be at home. His priorities shifted subtly each day. Margaret observed this transformation with quiet approval. "You've changed." "Sir," the housekeeper remarked one morning as Michael sipped his coffee leisurely, instead of gulping it down on his way to the office. "Changed how, Margaret?" "More present," she replied, carefully choosing her words. "Before, it seemed like you only slept here. Now you truly live in this house." Michael smiled, acknowledging the truth in her observation. For years, he'd buried himself in work, building a real estate empire as if trying to fill a void he'd never fully understood. Now he knew. He'd been searching for roots, belonging, family. Evelyn, meanwhile, gradually adjusted to her new reality. Accustomed to scarcity and the daily struggle for survival, she initially felt out of place in this world of abundance. She refused expensive clothes or jewelry that Michael insisted on giving her. "I don't need these things, son," she'd say firmly. "I already have more than I ever dreamed of." But little by little, she allowed herself small comforts, a pair of soft slippers, a cream for her dry hands, an especially comfortable armchair for her afternoon reading in the library. And Michael watched these small concessions with a full heart. Evelyn's cardiac treatment was progressing with promising results. The regular medication, a proper diet, and the care of the best specialists made a visible difference. Her cheeks gained color, her breathing became less labored, and she could climb the stairs without needing to stop to catch her breath. "Dr. Stevens said your heart is responding very well to the treatment," Michael commented after an appointment. "He believes we can avoid surgery if we keep this up." "It's the benefits of finding peace, my son," Evelyn replied, with a serene smile. "Finally, I can sleep without the weight of uncertainty." The bond between mother and son deepened each day. They made up for lost time by sharing stories, discovering shared tastes, and creating new memories. Michael was fascinated to realize how many of his traits and preferences came from his biological mother. His love for books, his passion for classical music, even his habit of waking at sunrise. One Sunday afternoon, as they talked in the garden, Michael asked a question he had been putting off. "Mum, would you like to visit my adoptive father? Robert Coleman still lives in the Hamptons. My adoptive mother, Catherine, passed away 10 years ago, but he would love to meet you." Evelyn considered for a moment. "Do you think he'd be comfortable with that?" Actually, it was his idea. When I told him about our reunion, he said he always wanted to thank in person the woman who gave birth to his son. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "It would be an honor to meet the man who raised my son so well." The meeting with Robert Coleman, an 80-year-old gentleman with still elegant bearing and keen eyes, was emotional for everyone. In the country house in the Hamptons, among the pine trees and under the clear mountain sky, two people who had never met but shared love for the same man came face to face for the first time. "Mrs. Evelyn," Robert said, taking her hands in his, "you don't know how long I've waited for this moment." "Mr. Robert, "I'm the one who should thank you for giving my son everything I couldn't," she replied, her voice trembling. "Please, just call me Robert, and there's no need for thanks. Michael was the greatest blessing we received. Catherine would have been so happy to meet you." Over that weekend, the three of them shared stories, laughter, and a few tears. Robert showed photo albums of Michael growing up, first steps, graduations, family trips. For Evelyn, it was like recovering a precious part of her son's life that she had missed. "He was always stubborn," Robert remarked, pointing to a photo of teenage Michael with a determined expression. "Once he set his mind on something, nothing could change it." "That he got from his biological father?" Evelyn laughed. "Harold was always like that." "And the sensitivity?" Robert asked, looking fondly at a photo of Michael at the piano. "That surely came from you." Michael watched the two of them talking with a strange and wonderful feeling. His worlds, so long separated, were finally connecting. Back in New York City, Michael realized something still bothered him. While Evelyn was adjusting well to her new life and her health was visibly improving, he noticed a certain sadness in her eyes when she saw news about homeless people or passed by city shelters. "Do you miss something, Mum?" he asked during dinner. Evelyn hesitated before answering. "Not exactly miss, son. It's more of a concern. I know so many people still on the streets facing what I faced. People who helped me when I had nothing. I think of them often." Michael understood immediately. His mother, despite all the comfort she now had, couldn't forget those still struggling. "What do you think about starting a project to help these people?" he suggested. "A foundation, perhaps. Something that could make a real difference." Evelyn's eyes lit up. "You would do that?" "We would, Mom. Together. You know the real needs of these people better than any consultant I could hire." And so the New Beginnings Foundation was born, dedicated especially to elderly women in vulnerable situations. Beyond temporary shelter and meals, the project offered training courses, medical and legal assistance, and help reconnecting with lost family members. Evelyn found her purpose in coordinating the foundation. Her first-hand knowledge of the hardships of life on the streets brought authenticity to the project. The women they served saw in her not just a benefactor, but someone who truly understood their struggles. Michael, in turn, discovered a new dimension in his real estate business. He began directing part of his investments towards social housing and rehabilitating degraded areas of the city. His perspective on success expanded beyond profits, incorporating social impact and sustainability. In one of the foundation's first initiatives, Evelyn organized a day of free medical care. Among the volunteers was Dr. Stevens, her cardiologist, who had been moved by her story. "Mrs. Evelyn, you're an inspiration," the doctor remarked, watching her coordinate the team with renewed energy. "Seeing you today, no one would ever imagine all you've been through." "Life surprises us, Doctor," she replied with a serene smile. "When we least expect it, it gives us second chances." On a special Sunday, the New Beginnings Foundation celebrated its first anniversary with an event in Central Park. Amid colorful booths, live music, and activities for all ages, Michael watched, his mother interacting with beneficiaries and volunteers, feeling a pride impossible to put into words. Beside him, Robert Coleman, who had come especially from the Hamptons for the occasion, said with emotion, "You know, son, your mother Catherine always said you had a special destiny. She felt that beyond business, you'd find a way to make a real difference in the world, and she was right." "I had good examples, Dad," Michael replied, embracing the older man, "from both families." Later, as the celebration continued, Michael found a quiet moment alone with Evelyn, on a bench under a leafy tree. "Happy, Mom?" he asked, holding her hand. "More than I ever imagined possible, son," she answered, her eyes shining. "You know, for years, I searched for you to complete my own life. But now I understand our reunion had a greater purpose." "How so?" "Look around," she said, gesturing to the park full of people receiving care, regaining dignity. "All of this exists because we knocked on the right door on a stormy night." Michael reflected on chance, or fate, or whatever name could be given, to that series of unlikely coincidences that had reunited mother and son after 30 years. The scar, he'd noticed, the book Evelyn had found in the library, all the little clues that led them to the truth. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you'd knocked on a different door that night," he said, shuddering at the thought. "But I didn't knock on a different door," Evelyn replied simply. "I knocked on my son's door. Maybe my heart. I knew somehow." That evening, as they returned home after the successful event, Michael and Evelyn were greeted by Margaret with a surprise. The housekeeper had prepared a special dinner to celebrate not only the foundation's anniversary, but also 1 year since mother and son had reunited. "I thought the occasion deserved something special," Margaret explained, visibly proud of her gesture. The table was beautifully set with the finest china and fresh flowers at the center. But what truly moved Evelyn was the main dish. A chicken with piquis recipe she had casually mentioned was her favorite from her childhood in Pennsylvania. "Margaret, how did you know?" she asked, touched by the attention to detail. "I have attentive ears, ma'am," the housekeeper replied with a discreet smile. "And I thought a taste of your roots would be fitting to celebrate your journey." During dinner, Michael raised a toast. "To my mother, Evelyn, the strongest woman I know, who never gave up even when everything seemed impossible." Evelyn discreetly wiped away a tear before responding. "And to my son, who opened not just the door of his home but also his heart to a stranger on a stormy night." Margaret, usually reserved, unexpectedly added, "And to second chances. May we all recognize them when they appear in our lives." After dinner, sitting on the porch under a starry sky, Michael handed his mother a small package. "I have something for you." Inside the box was a delicate silver chain with a star-shaped pendant, simple yet shining. "To remind you of that lullaby," he explained, "about the traveler from the stars who always finds his way home." Evelyn couldn't hold back her tears as Michael fastened the jewelry around her neck. "It's perfect, son. Thank you." Gazing at the night sky, Michael reflected on how his life had completely changed in just 1 year. Before, he had been a successful businessman but emotionally empty, always chasing new ventures as if something essential were missing. Now he understood what that void had been, the absence of his true roots, of his full story. "What are you thinking about, son?" Evelyn asked, noticing his prolonged silence. "About how we're shaped by our stories, Mum. For years, I lived with a crucial piece missing from the puzzle of my identity. Now I understand better who I am." "And who are you, Michael?" she asked softly. He smiled, taking his mother's wrinkled hands in his. "I'm the son of Evelyn Barnes, a boy from Pennsylvania who was lucky enough to be raised by loving adoptive parents. I'm a man who lost and found his origins again, and above all, I'm someone who finally understands that success isn't measured by bank accounts, but by the ability to make a difference in others' lives." Evelyn smiled, her heart overflowing with pride and gratitude. "Then you're exactly the man I always knew you'd be, even when I could only dream of you." A gentle breeze rustled the garden leaves, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers. In the mansion that once felt like just a big empty house, now lived a true family. One rebuilt from the ashes of a painful past, but now flourishing with the promise of a meaningful future. Michael watched his mother gazing at the stars, the pendant shimmering softly in the moonlight. He thought of all the nights she must have looked up at the same sky, wondering where her son was. Of all the doors she had knocked on, all the streets she had walked, always carrying the hope of a reunion. And here they were now, brought together by fate, by chance, or perhaps by something deeper and unexplainable. The unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. "Mum, I promise we'll never be apart again," said Michael, feeling the need to voice that commitment. "I know, my son," she replied with the serenity of someone who had finally found her safe harbor. "Some bonds are too strong to be broken, even by time or distance." In the weeks that followed, the New Beginnings Foundation gained national attention after a special report on its work. Evelyn's personal story, shared with her permission, inspired similar initiatives across the country. Donations began pouring in, allowing the project to expand to other cities. Michael, who had always avoided the public eye, surprised himself by accepting invitations to speak about corporate social responsibility. Standing beside his mother, he shared not only the foundation's work, but also his personal journey of reunion and transformation. Life teaches us in unexpected ways, he often said in his speeches. Sometimes we need to lose something precious to understand its true value. And if we're lucky, we get a second chance to do better. Evelyn, in turn, became a respected voice in discussions about public policies for vulnerable individuals. Her first-hand experience, combined with unwavering dignity, gave her words unique authority. On one such occasion, after a public hearing, at City Hall, a journalist asked her, "Mrs. Evelyn, don't you feel anger over the lost time? Over the years you were kept from watching your son grow up." She paused before answering. "Anger is a luxury that consumes too much energy. I'd rather use that energy to make sure other mothers don't go through what I did. That other children don't grow up not knowing their true story. And that other separated families get the same chance we did, a new beginning." Her response was widely shared, touching hearts and inspiring reflections on forgiveness and purpose. One quiet afternoon, as Michael worked in his home office, Margaret entered discreetly with a cup of coffee and surprising news. "Sir, there's a young lady in the living room asking to speak with Mrs. Evelyn. She says she's your niece." Michael nearly dropped his pen. "My niece? Margaret, there must be some mistake." "That's what I thought, sir, but she insists. She says her name is Jennifer Barnes, daughter of Daniel Barnes, who would be your brother." Michael felt the ground vanish beneath him. A brother. He had never known he had one. Could his mother have had another child? With his heart racing, he walked to the living room, where he found a young woman around 25, with dark hair and features that inexplicably resembled his own. "Good afternoon," he greeted, trying to stay composed. "I'm Michael Coleman. Margaret said you're looking for my mother." The young woman stood nervously. "Yes, sir, my name is Jennifer Barnes. I'm looking for Evelyn Barnes. I believe she's my grandmother. And your father would be Daniel Barnes. He passed away 6 months ago. Among his belongings, I found documents and photos of Evelyn. My father always told me his mother had left when he was a child. He never knew more about her. When I saw the report about the foundation on TV, I recognized the name and face. I couldn't believe it." Michael struggled to process the information. A brother he had never known, now gone, and a niece appearing suddenly, bringing another piece of their complex family puzzle. Just then, Evelyn entered the room, returning from her work at the foundation. When she saw the young visitor, she stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her chest. "Mom," Michael called, stepping forward with concern. "Are you all right?" Evelyn didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the young woman, whose features so closely resembled her youngest son, the one she had left behind when he was only 2 years old, forced to leave home. "Daniel," she murmured finally, "you look so much like your father." Margaret took a hesitant step toward the elderly woman. "Are you really Evelyn Barnes?" "Yes, my dear. And you must be Margaret, Daniel's daughter." Evelyn's legs weakened. Michael rushed to steady her, helping her sit on the sofa. The revelation was too much for her fragile heart. "My Daniel," whispered Evelyn, tears streaming freely down her face. "How was he? What was his life like?" Margaret sat beside her, opening a folder she had brought. "He had a good life, Grandma. Hard at first, but good. He was a history professor at a university in Los Angeles. Here are some photos of him." Evelyn traced the photographs with trembling fingers. A boy growing up, a smiling teenager, a young man at graduation, a mature man with his family. A whole life captured in images she had no part in. "2 children," she murmured, looking at Michael. "2 children taken from me." "He looked for you, Grandma," Margaret said softly. "I found his journals, notes about trying to find you over the years. Grandpa told him you abandoned the family, but Dad never believed it. He always felt something was wrong with that story." Michael watched the scene with a mix of emotions: shock at the discovery of a brother, sadness for never having known him, and renewed anger toward Harold, who had torn apart not just mother and son, but also 2 brothers who could have grown up together. "Margaret," he finally said, "do you have more family? Your mother?" "Mom lives with me in Los Angeles. Dad married young, they only had me." Evelyn clutched the photos to her chest. as if embracing her lost son. Did he know about me? About what really happened? In his last years, he hired a private investigator, Margaret explained. He found out about the forced institutionalization, how Grandpa manipulated everything. He was about to intensify the search when he suddenly fell ill. An aneurysm. It was very quick. A painful silence filled the room. The loss was twofold. Evelyn had not only missed years of her youngest son's life, but now also the chance of reuniting with him. Michael knelt before his mother, holding her hands. "Mom, you still have family. You have me and now Margaret too, and your daughter-in-law. We're not all together yet, but we can be." Evelyn nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "You're right, Margaret," she said, finally a small smile breaking through the sadness. "You really do look like your father. You have his eyes, the same face shape, and something in your expression reminds me so much of my Daniel when he was little." Margaret smiled through her tears. "Dad would have been so happy to find you. He never stopped searching, never stopped hoping." "Neither did I," Evelyn replied, "for both my sons." That night, the Coleman mansion welcomed a new story within its walls. Between tears and smiles, Evelyn, Michael, and Margaret shared memories, filling in the gaps of decades apart. Photos were spread across the coffee table, timelines pieced together, coincidences uncovered. "It's incredible to think you lived in the same city for years without knowing," Margaret remarked, showing photos of her father in New York City during an academic stint. "Dad taught at the same university where you graduated, Uncle Michael. You might have passed each other in the halls." The thought of having been so close yet never meeting brought a bittersweet ache to Michael. So many missed opportunities, so many moments they could have shared. Later, when Jennifer retreated to the guest room, Michael found his mother in the library, gazing melancholically at Daniel's photographs. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said, sitting beside her. "For all the time you lost with him. Don't apologize, son. None of us were at fault. And look," she pointed to a photo of Daniel with the family at a beach. "He was happy. He built a beautiful life, had a wonderful daughter. That comforts me." "Still, it's unfair. Life rarely is, Michael, but sometimes it offers unexpected compensations. I found you again. Now I've met my granddaughter, and through her I can know the son I never got to watch grow up." Michael hugged his mother, admiring once more her resilience and ability to find light even in the darkest situations. The next day, Jennifer called her mother in Los Angeles, telling her about meeting her grandmother. Sarah Barnes, Daniel's widow, was moved by the news and promised to come to New York City as soon as possible. A week later, the family gathered for the first time: Evelyn, Michael, Jennifer, and Sarah. 4 people bound by blood and love, separated by fate and reunited through persistence. "Daniel often spoke about how he wished he had siblings," Sarah remarked during dinner. "It's a shame you two never met in person." "But we've met through you now," Michael replied, "and that's already an invaluable gift." Evelyn watched the scene with an overflowing heart. Her family, once torn apart, was now mending in unexpected ways. The circle would never be whole again, but new circles were forming, bringing fresh possibilities of love and belonging. As winter gave way to spring, life in the Coleman mansion blossomed with new routines. Jennifer decided to transfer her History Masters program to New York City to be closer to her newly discovered grandmother. Sarah visited often, bringing more stories and memories of Daniel. Michael, in turn, embraced his new role as an uncle with enthusiasm. He and Jennifer discovered shared interests, debating politics and literature over long dinners, building a connection that somehow honored the memory of the brother he'd never known. The New Beginnings Foundation expanded, opening a new branch in Los Angeles under Sarah's coordination, who had left her job as a social worker to dedicate herself to her mother-in-law's project. The foundation's work gained national recognition, influencing public policies and inspiring similar initiatives in other cities. On a sunny afternoon, as the family gathered for lunch in the garden, Robert Coleman, who visited with increasing frequency, made an unexpected announcement. "I've decided to sell the house in the Hamptons," the elderly man said. "It's too big for me alone, and frankly, I'd rather be where life is happening, and life clearly is happening here. Are you thinking of Michael began, surprised. "Yes, son. If you and Evelyn don't mind, I'd like to move closer. Not necessarily into this house, but perhaps an apartment in the neighborhood." Evelyn was the first to react. "Nonsense, Robert. This house has plenty of room. It would be an honor to have you with us." Michael watched this new development with emotion. His adoptive father and biological mother had developed a genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and their shared love for him. It was more than he could have imagined. The Coleman Barnes family, as they now called themselves, grew and strengthened. Sundays became special days, with long lunches, afternoon card games, and conversations that stretched late into the night. The once silent, formal mansion now echoed with laughter and lively discussions. On one such Sunday afternoon, as everyone relaxed after lunch, the phone rang. It was during their stay in Greenwich. Harold Coleman had suffered a second stroke, more severe than the first, and the doctors were not optimistic about his recovery. Michael looked at his mother, unsure of what to do. Evelyn didn't hesitate. "We need to go see him, son." "Are you sure, Mom, after everything he did?" "Precisely because of everything he did, we need to go, to close this chapter with peace, once and for all." Jennifer, who knew the whole story, offered to go with them. She wanted to meet her biological grandfather, even under such difficult circumstances. At the clinic, they found Harold unconscious, hooked up to machines monitoring his vital signs. The attending doctor offered little hope. "The brain damage is extensive. If he survives, he likely won't regain consciousness." Evelyn sat by the bed, watching the man she had once loved, then feared, and now saw only as a vulnerable human being nearing the end of his journey. "Harold," she said softly, holding her ex-husband's limp hand. "We're here. Me, Michael, and your granddaughter Jennifer, Daniel's daughter." There was no visible response, but Evelyn continued. "We didn't come with anger or resentment. We came to say that despite everything, we've become a family. Not in the way you imagine, not the way any of us planned, but a family all the same. And you're part of that story, for better or worse." Michael watched his mother with renewed admiration. Her ability to forgive, to find peace even in the face of the man who had caused so much pain, was extraordinary. Jennifer timidly approached the bed. "I'm Jennifer, Daniel's daughter," she said, though she doubted her grandfather could hear. "Dad left us not long ago. I wanted you to know he had a good life, a happy one, and that now we've all found each other." 3 days later, Harold Coleman passed away without regaining consciousness. The funeral was simple, with few in attendance beyond the newly reunited family. Michael was surprised to realize he no longer felt the anger he had harbored for so long toward his biological father. In its place was only a quiet acceptance that this man, with all his flaws and mistakes, was part of his story. Back at the mansion after the funeral, the family gathered in the library. Against all expectations, there was a sense of serenity, as if a difficult chapter had finally closed. "You know what amazes me most about all of this," Robert remarked, breaking the reflective silence. "How chance, or fate, or whatever you want to call it, finds ways to reconnect what was torn apart." "How so, Dad?" Michael asked. "Think about it. After 30 years apart, your mother knocks on your door during a storm. Out of all the houses in New York City, she ends up at yours. If that's not fate at work, I don't know what is." Evelyn smiled softly. "Maybe it wasn't entirely chance," she said. "For years, whenever I arrived in a new city, I'd visit the most elegant neighborhoods, look at the mansions, wondering if my children might be living in one of them. That night, the storm caught me in Scarsdale because I was doing what I always did, searching, hoping, never giving up." "Persistence creates its own fate," observed Jennifer, the family historian. "It's not just luck or coincidence when someone never stops looking." In the weeks that followed, it was discovered that Harold, in his final years, had amended his will. To everyone's surprise, he left his remaining possessions, the house, in Greenwich, and some savings, divided equally between Michael and Jennifer, as Daniel's representative. A handwritten note scrawled in shaky writing simply read, "For my children and granddaughter. May they find what they're looking for." It seems that in the end he tried to make peace in his own way, Sarah remarked when they heard the news. Michael had decided to sell the property in Greenwich and use the money to further expand the work of the New Beginnings Foundation. It seemed fitting that Harold's final legacy would help people separated from their families to reconnect. On a quiet afternoon, as he watched his mother dozing on the porch lulled by the gentle spring breeze, Michael reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. A beggar knocking on the door of a mansion during a storm, a peculiar scar that had awakened long-buried memories, a children's book kept for decades, small coincidences that, together, had rewritten the fate of an entire family. Margaret approached quietly, carrying a cup of tea. "She seems at peace," the housekeeper observed, watching Evelyn with evident fondness. "She is, finally," Michael agreed. "She found everything she had been searching for so long. And what about you, Mr. Michael? Have you also found what you were looking for?" Michael smiled, recognizing the depth of that simple question. "I found something I didn't even know I was searching for, Margaret. I found my roots, my complete story. And I discovered that true success isn't in the businesses I built, but in the bonds we form." Evelyn slowly woke up, smiling when she saw her son. Her eyes, once always shadowed with sadness, now radiated a serenity that only comes when life's circles are complete. "I was dreaming of you as a little boy," she said, adjusting herself in the chair. "Of you and Daniel playing together as it should have been." "That's a beautiful dream, Mother," Michael replied, holding her hand. "Yes, but reality is beautiful too, son. Different than I imagined, but just as precious." On the horizon, the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A soft breeze stirred the porch curtains, carrying the scent of the garden. In the mansion that once seemed nothing more than a cold, imposing structure, the warmth of a rebuilt family now pulsed. The beggar who had sought shelter without knowing she was knocking on her lost son's door had found far more than a roof. She had found her way back home. And for everyone in the Coleman Barnes family, that unlikely reunion was proof that even in the darkest moments, the persistence of love can light unexpected paths back into the arms of those we cherish. The end of the story. Dear listener, if this journey of reunion has touched your heart, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe in the power of fate that brought Evelyn and Michael together after so many years? Leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories that remind us it's never too late to start again.